A new piece of reporting we brought you here on Friday simply adds to the extensive list of questionable secret practices and relationships of Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas and concerns about ethics and influence by our nation's highest court. It was first reported by ProPublica that Justice Thomas made at least 2 previously undisclosed appearances at least 2 donor summits hosted by the powerful right-wing Koch network that has for decades now brought several cases before the Supreme Court, including one of the most closely watched in the upcoming term. Joining our conversation is Democratic Senator from Rhode Island and member of the Senate Judiciary Committee, Senator Sheldon Whitehouse. He also continues to be one of the most prominent voices demanding through legislation and briefs a code of ethics for the Supreme Court. We wish you were here when this story broke. We had the reporter and other court watchers, but I know you've had a lot to say about these issues and these clear and brazen conflicts. They seem to be growing more clear and more brazen to the general public, and I wonder if you think that's creating an opportunity.
Yeah, I think it is. I think, each one of these episodes is pretty disgraceful all by itself. But as you see them in series, you begin to see the commonalities that emerge across the series. You begin to see that it's always a right-wing billionaire, that it's always a right-wing justice, that Leonard Leo, the ubiquitous little court fixer, is almost inevitably involved, that it always involves the Federalist Society or Ginny Thomas's little charity or the Americans for Prosperity battleship of the Koch brothers. And while every single one doesn't have every one of these pieces, when you stack them all up over and over again, it's the same little network of a few right-wing billionaires. I think we're up to 6 right now, and a few right-wing justices, 2 that we've discovered so far, and then the front groups that intermediate between the billionaires and the right-wing justices. And as you said, it involves actual cases. So this is for real. And the technique that the justices are applying right now is simply no answering of questions. I'm just going to pretend everything is fine. There's no process for fact-finding. There's no investigative effort whatsoever. So I think that's what's going to have to break. And I think it probably will break either through the judicial conference with real judges who are getting fed up, or perhaps even through the court itself, or if it continues to get this bad, through my legislation.
I want to read from a new amicus brief in the Loper case and have you sort of explain and translate this. You filed this last week with several of your colleagues, and it says this: the Trump administration's efforts had the full support of Charles and David Koch, 2 of the biggest financial backers of the effort to elect office holders committed to deregulation. Of course, the fossil fuel-funded Koch network stands to gain from deregulation, hence the presence of so many Koch-connected amicus supporting petitioners in this case. The pivot of so many groups to attack Chevron and thereby transfer power from agencies to judges follows this long effort within the courts. This is something that Dahlia Lithwick brought to life and translated for us non-Supreme Court experts. But this really is of vital importance to nothing less than the government's ability to function. Can you give us some context to this?
Yeah, the backdrop to this is that years ago, these right-wing billionaires determined that the Supreme Court was a really good way to accomplish their goals because it wasn't politically responsive. So they could get justices who would do things that the public would hate, that even Republican legislators would not do. And so they began this long process of trying to get rid of American regulation, particularly if you're a fossil fuel polluter. All those regulations interfere with your profits in a very, very big way. And so they built doctrines and they appointed judges and they put money behind getting them on the court. And they created front groups to file briefs telling the judges what to do in the court. And then they've had this massive string of victories, like the West Virginia versus EPA case, which completely changed the law about what regulatory agencies can and cannot do. So the problem of these justices accepting these grotesque favors from right-wing billionaires is one piece in this larger tapestry of right-wing billionaires controlling who got on the court, sending messages to the court about what to do, and producing a court that will do things to America that the democratic process would not do.
United States Supreme Court right now is held in the lowest esteem since Gallup has been asking the question. The public is convinced.
Yeah, deserve it.
ProPublica has done a body of investigative journalism. Not a single contradicting fact has been produced by any of the justices or any of the billionaires you're talking about. It seems that the facts are being developed. The public is convinced. What stands between change and the justice's inability to do anything to preserve its own, the court's own integrity doesn't seem to matter to the justices themselves, I guess is what I'm trying to ask you. How do we help them help themselves?
Yeah, well, a couple of ways. I think one of the better ways is to continue to urge the Judicial Conference, the administrative body that runs the judicial branch of government, which is made up almost entirely of chief judges from the circuit courts of appeal and from several district courts. There's only one Supreme Court justice on it, and part of their job is to run the disciplinary apparatus over their federal judges. So they know really well what's legitimate and what's not legitimate for conduct, and what's legitimate and what's not legitimate for excuses. And they know perfectly well that both the conduct and the excuses of the Supreme Court justices is not legitimate. So the pressure there is beginning to build. And I think the pressure in the court is beginning to build. You've now had Kavanaugh and the Chief Justice and Kagan all say, hey, we know we need to fix this and we're working on it. So continued pressure, continued exposure. The thing that's missing here, Nicolle, is that nobody will come up with real facts. It's the only place in all of government where if you've got a complaint about an official, there's no place to go where anybody will do an honest job of finding out what the facts are. So the justices make it up, or they simply go into silence and refuse to speak. And we're deprived of knowing what the story is. I think in many cases, what we'll find is that the story is a good deal worse even than what ProPublica has revealed.
Yeah, I mean, that even pertains to a leak that they seemingly were upset about themselves, but they didn't turn over to anyone with any actual leak investigation experience. I have to ask you, because I have you and because it's in the news, your thoughts and your position on calls from two of your fellow Democratic senators for Democratic Senator Robert Menendez to step down.
I've been a U.S. attorney. I've been in the shoes of the New York prosecutor. I don't think that it really matters to them very much what members of Congress say. And my very strong inclination is to let the judicial process play out and let justice be done.
A true separation of the branches, public official. Senator Sheldon Whitehouse, thank you very much. We'll stay on this story, and we really appreciate getting to talk to you about all these extraordinary investigative stories. Thank you very much for joining us today.